Hello, welcome to this tutorial on how to do your ESO Phase 2, which is essentially how to prepare your observations so they can be executed successfully at the ESO telescopes. I'm Miguel Bioque, I'm a member of the ESO User Support Department, and in this tutorial I'll give you a brief overview of what Phase 2 is all about and how you can get started with it. It all truly starts with an email like this one, which says, "Congratulations, you got your proposal accepted and now you have to prepare your observations so they can be executed at the ESO telescopes." The email is signed by your ESO User Support Astronomer, which will be the person with whom you will interact for any questions you might have or for any issues that appear during the preparation of the observations, during their execution, or with the data reduction pipelines. Very importantly, there is a line stating when the deadline for Phase 2 is. You will need to have your Phase 2 material submitted before this deadline so your User Support Astronomer have time to review your material and ensure that there are no issues, and if there are, to have time to interact with you so all issues are resolved well before the beginning of the period. Once you receive this email, you can go to the ESO Phase 2 portal that looks like this. You have to log in with your username and password. You should have those from Phase 1, and once you enter, you should see this page. Here you can see the runs that have been allocated to you. You will see they are named by the proposal run ID. Let's open one of our accepted X-Shooter proposals. We click on the plus symbol to access the observations of this proposal. At first, the run is empty, but you can choose one of the following items to add to it. First, we have OB. OB stands for Observing Block, and observing blocks are the fundamental unit of observations at ESO. They are essentially the minimum unit that can be run at one of the ESO telescopes. In general terms, one OB can be associated with one observation. We also have CB, which stands for calibration blocks, which are similar to OBs but for calibrations. And then we have 4 more buttons, which are different ways of grouping observing blocks and calibration blocks. We have folders, groups, time link containers, and concatenation containers. So essentially, we define each single observation as an OB or CV, and then there are different manners of grouping these observations. For example, you might want to have 2 observations executed back-to-back, in which case you want to concatenate your OBs and put your 2 OBs within the same concatenation container. But it might be you want one observation to be executed 2 weeks after the first observation. In that case, you might want to use a time link container to describe this setting. So, the Phase 2 of ESO is designed so you can do almost anything you will be able to do if you had full control of the telescope. Let's start with the single case in which I want to define an observation with a single OB. I click on OB, and now a new OB has been created. At the beginning, it's empty and it looks like this. First, it's good to put a name to your OB so it's easy to identify. Let me call this one Tutorial OB. Second, we move to the Observation Description tab. This tab is very important as it defines the observation itself. Let's first put a name to what we're trying to do. For example, let's observe a star. We can add some comments and, very importantly, let's give a brief description of the expected SNR. This is important because it will be seen by the night astronomer when the observations are taken, and it will be used to evaluate the quality of the observations. Boxes like this will change from instrument to instrument, but the general idea is to try to describe the observations and the expected outcome as simply as possible to the night astronomers. Let's say that at the end of the day I'm expecting an SNR of 100 at 650 nanometers for this one source. Now we are ready to define our observations. We need to add templates to instruct the telescope and instruments about what to do. There are acquisition, science, and calibration templates. You can see all the templates available here. Each template is something the telescope and instrument can do. Of course, they differ from instrument to instrument, and they are all described in the issuer manual of each instrument. Because I'm using X-Shooter, I'm planning on taking some spectra, so let's start with a slicked acquisition. Now the acquisition template is generated. Here we can define several parameters. The default option is often the most common one, but again, in case of doubt, the user manual is the place to check. Let me set the mandatory ones and leave the rest to default. Now that I have my telescope acquisition, I can create my science template. Let's do a spectra nodding on the slit. Again, we have many hyperparameters to tweak. Some of them are obvious, like the slit width or the exposure time, but some of them might not be as straightforward. Again, in case of doubt, the user manual is the place to go, and remember you can always contact your support astronomer. We're here to help. Note that you can keep adding templates here if you want to do more things within the same OB, although, as a general rule, OBs are not allowed to be longer than 1 hour. So, Now I have defined what my OB or observing block will do. It will take an acquisition and do a spectroscopy nodding on the slit. Cool. But I have not defined what source am I targeting or under which weather conditions I would like these observations to be taken. This can be done in the next tabs. We have the Target tab. Here we define what are we observing. Let's say I want to observe my favorite star, HD 123456. I can click on Resolve and it will talk to Simba to fill in all these target properties. But you can also set them by hand. And luckily for us, HD 123456 is observable from Paranal, and also Phase 2 is intelligent enough to remember the sources you propose to observe in Phase 1, so you can select them directly. Now that we have defined how we're observing and what we're observing, we can move to the Constraint Set tab. This tab defines atmospheric and illumination conditions for your observations. All of these parameters are described within the ESO documentation if you have doubts, and remember you cannot put a stronger constraint than those that you put in Phase 1. In the next tab, you can include absolute time constraints, like please observe between this day and this other day. Also ephemeris, if your object is a fast-moving object, typically a solar system body. In the Target Visibility tab, you can see when is your source observable with the constraining set that you put. So in this example, HD 123456 happens to be observable the night that we are recording this video. And you can see in red when it is not observable because it goes below the air mass we set or it gets too close to zenith. Very importantly, the ObsPrep tab. ObsPrep can be understood as a software that's implemented within the Phase 2 tool and that allows you to fine-tune very specific parameters of the instrument that you're using. So obviously this tab will be very different from instrument to instrument, but in essence it allows you to play with the fine details that the templates that you define in Ops description did not allow you to. So for example here we can change the orientation of the slit or do very specific offsets. Also, not less important, if you want the Paranal team to find your source in the sky, you need to give them good finding charts. You can upload your own, but the Phase 2 tool also allows you to generate them automatically in most cases. Once that all of this is done, congrats, you've made your first observing block. Now we need to check everything is fine. For that, we need to click on the check button here at the top. It will inform you of any issues with the OB that we need to address. For example, here it is complaining I have not defined exposure times. Fair enough, let me do so. And now the observation is acceptable. We have thumbs up. But I still get some warnings. Always important to read and understand the warnings. They often alert you of things you might want to double check. In case of doubt, remember you can always contact your support astronomer. As a final trick, you can check the total time requested by this one OB by clicking here. In this case, it is 16 minutes. Once you are happy with your OB, you can click on Certify, which will change the status of your OB to read only, this signifying your OB is ready to be reviewed. Now you have done one OB, you need to do the rest of OBs of your observing run. A run can have one OB or many of them. Before finishing, let me show you how to use containers. Let's suppose I want two OBs to be observed back to back. I can put them inside a concatenation container. I click on the C and a concatenation container is created. I can now create my OBs or calibration blocks within this container. This means they will appear back to back or concatenated in the observing queue. We can also create a time link container by clicking on the T. If we create OBs within a time link container, we can then in the Schedule tab define how do we want to separate them in time. Once all of our OBs have been certified, we can click on the name of our run and this should give us an overview of the run and some basic information of it. In the Schedule tab, we can also see if there are any time intervals and we can also set our priorities. If we have a proposal with several observing blocks, here we can define which of them are more important to us so they are given priority for being observed. Going back to the proposal information, something very important here is the ReadMe. In the ReadMe tab, we will be asked to describe important aspects of our observing plan, like if there is any time-critical aspect or any special calibration that is needed. Something that we will always need to do is to write a general description. This description will be the one that the night astronomer will read before starting any of your OBs. So it needs to contain enough information for the observatory to know what are your observations about and what are the key things the service mode observer should know. Better to be concise so essential information does not get dissolved accidentally. Also, there is a checklist as a final reminder of important things we should have addressed during the proposal preparation. Once you've done all of this, and all of your OBs are certified, you are done with Phase 2. You can click on Notify ESO. This will do two things. It will block your material from further editing, and it will notify your support astronomer that the observing material is ready to be reviewed. Your support astronomer will then approve the observing blocks and ingest them into the telescope queue, or will come back to you requesting some changes or alerting you of some possible issues. Finally, you can always test and play around in P2Demo. This is a version of the Phase 2 tool in which you can simulate creating observations for any instrument. It is very useful for playing around at early stages when you still do not have the full picture of your observational plan, and even for evaluating the feasibility of observations at the Phase 1 stage when you are writing proposals. I hope you find this tutorial useful. There are many things that are not described in this tutorial, especially about the details of each instrument, but we will add detailed videos for each ESO instrument to this channel. In case of doubt, the user manual of each instrument should contain all information you need. Or you can contact us at ESO User Support.